Chapter 1. The breaking point. Jeff Brinks stared at the blinking cursor on his monitor like it was mocking him. The spreadsheet in front of him was pristine, columns aligned, formulas airtight, conditional formatting glowing like a traffic light system for efficiency. It was the kind of work that made him proud, the kind of work that had earned him the unofficial title of Office Oracle. If someone needed an answer, Jeff had it. If someone needed a shortcut, Jeff knew it. If someone needed a lifeline at 4:59 p.m., Jeff was the guy who stayed late to throw it. But lately, that title felt less like a badge of honor and more like a neon sign flashing "Use me." He leaned back in his chair, the worn leather creaking under his weight. 3 years at this company. 3 years of doing everything right. Showing up early, staying late, training new hires, fixing problems that weren't his to fix. And what did he have to show for it? A desk plant that was slowly dying and a chair that squeaked like a haunted house. The first promotion had stung, but he'd swallowed it. Maybe they saw something in her he didn't. Fine. The second one, that was harder. He'd been working toward that position for months, and his manager knew it. When they gave it to someone he trained, someone who still asked him how to run a pivot table, Jeff had smiled through gritted teeth and congratulated them. The third one, that was the breaking point. Not only did they promote another newbie, but his manager had asked him to train the guy on how to do the job Jeff wanted. That was the day Jeff realized something ugly. They weren't overlooking him because he lacked skills. They were overlooking him because he made their lives easier right where he was. Why move the utility player when he kept the whole game running? Jeff rubbed his temples. He wasn't angry, well, maybe a little, but mostly he was tired. Tired of being the guy everyone leaned on while they climbed the ladder. Tired of watching people stand on his shoulders and wave from the top like they'd flown there themselves. Not anymore. He opened his email, fingers hovering over the keyboard. A help request from Karen in accounting blinked at him like a needy child. Hey Jeff, quick question. Can you help me fix this formula? It's urgent. Normally, Jeff would have jumped in. He'd have fixed it in 30 seconds and saved Karen's day. But today was different. He typed back, "Hi Karen. Please submit a help ticket to IT. They'll assist you." Sent. Done. No guilt. Well, maybe a little guilt, but he ignored it. Almost immediately, his phone buzzed. Karen. Of course. Jeff. Hey. Her voice was sugary sweet, the kind people use when they're about to ask for something big. Got your email. Thing is, IT takes forever and you're so good at this stuff. Could you just... Karen? Jeff said, keeping his tone polite but firm. I'm swamped. IT's the right channel. Pause. He could practically hear her blinking in confusion. Oh, okay, sure, thanks. He hung up and stared at the phone like it had betrayed him. That was the first time he'd ever said no. Felt weird. Liberating, but weird. Across the office, heads turned. Jeff Brinks saying no was like the sun refusing to rise. Whispers started. He ignored them. He wasn't going to be the fixer anymore. He'd do his job, do it well, and nothing more. If they wanted extra, they could pay for extra. He wasn't giving away his talent for free so someone else could use it as a stepping stone. Jeff closed his laptop at 5 on the dot. No lingering, no, just one more thing. He grabbed his coat and walked out, ignoring the surprised looks from his coworkers. Let them wonder. Let them panic. The safety net was gone. The cold January air slapped him in the face as he stepped outside. He pulled his scarf tighter and started down the street, his breath puffing in little clouds. Normally, he'd head straight home, microwave something vaguely edible, and scroll through streaming options until he fell asleep. But tonight, he needed something different. Something that didn't involve fluorescent lights and passive-aggressive emails. He spotted a coffee shop on the corner. A cozy little place with warm yellow lights and a chalkboard sign that read, "Try our winter special. Maple cinnamon latte." It sounded ridiculous. It sounded perfect. Inside, the shop smelled like heaven, coffee, sugar, and a hint of cinnamon. Jeff ordered the special because why not and waited by the counter. He was scrolling through his phone when it happened. A sudden jolt, a splash of warmth, a gasp. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." A voice bright, feminine, flustered. Jeff looked up to see a woman holding an empty cup, her cheeks flushed pink. His coat was wearing most of her latte. He blinked. "Well, that's one way to say hello." She laughed. A quick, musical sound that made something in Jeff's chest loosen. "Seriously, I'm so sorry. I wasn't looking. I was texting and... Ugh, I'm the worst." Jeff glanced at his dripping coat, then back at her. She had dark hair pulled into a messy bun, a scarf that looked like it had been knitted by someone who loved her, and eyes that sparkled even as they widened in horror. "It's fine," he said, smiling despite himself. "I was thinking of getting this dry cleaned anyway. You just sped up the process." She grinned, relief flooding her face. "Let me buy you another drink, or a muffin, or a new coat." "A muffin's fine," Jeff said. "Coat might be a stretch." She laughed again, and Jeff felt something he hadn't felt in months. A spark. Not a big one, not fireworks, but enough to make him notice. "I'm Sophie," she said, extending a hand like they were at a business meeting instead of a coffee shop crime scene. "Jeff." He shook her hand, warm and firm. "Nice to meet you, Sophie." "Nice to meet you too, Jeff." And seriously, I owe you a muffin. They ended up sharing a table while waiting for their orders. Sophie was funny, quick-witted, a little sarcastic, but in a way that felt playful, not sharp. She told him she was a freelance travel writer, which explained the scarf and the air of someone who'd seen more sunsets than spreadsheets. Jeff found himself talking more than he expected, about work, about the promotions, about how he decided to stop being the office hero. Sophie listened, head tilted, eyes bright. So you're basically staging a quiet rebellion, she said, sipping her latte. I like it. Rebellion's a strong word, Jeff said. I'm just setting boundaries. Boundaries are good, Sophie said. But maybe you need more than that. Jeff raised an eyebrow. Like what? She smiled, a little mischievous. Like something that makes you excited to wake up in the morning. Something that's not a spreadsheet. Jeff chuckled. You sound like a motivational poster. Hey, posters work, she said, grinning. Sometimes. Their muffins arrived, and they ate, and Jeff realized he was enjoying himself. Really enjoying himself. No office politics, no passive-aggressive emails. Just conversation. Just laughter. When they finally stood to leave, Sophie pulled out her phone. Give me your number, in case I spill coffee on you again. Jeff hesitated for half a second, then smiled. Sure. They exchanged numbers, and as Jeff stepped back into the cold night, he felt lighter. Not fixed, not whole, but lighter. Like maybe the day hadn't been a total disaster after all. Chapter 2. The unexpected reunion. Jeff wasn't sure why he checked his phone 3 times that Saturday morning. It wasn't like Sophie had promised to text. She'd said, give me your number in case I spill coffee on you again. That wasn't exactly a declaration of intent. Still, every time his phone buzzed, his pulse jumped like a kid waiting for a snow day announcement. It was never Sophie. It was spam, weather alerts, and one text from his mom reminding him to eat something green today. He sighed and shoved the phone into his pocket. By evening, Jeff was standing outside a downtown bar for his friend Ryan's birthday party. Ryan was the kind of guy who thought low-key meant inviting 30 people to a place with neon lights and a DJ who believed volume was a personality trait. Jeff had almost bailed. Crowds weren't his thing, but Ryan had been his college roommate, and loyalty was hardwired into Jeff's DNA. Inside, the bar was chaos. Music thumped, laughter spilled over tables, and the smell of fried food clung to the air like a needy ex-Jeff wove through the crowd, nodding at strangers, until he spotted Ryan near the back, wearing a paper crown and holding a beer like it was a royal scepter. Jeff! Ryan grinned, pulling him into a hug that smelled like hops and nostalgia. You made it! Wouldn't miss it, Jeff said, smiling. Happy birthday, man. They chatted for a few minutes, work, sports, Ryan's latest obsession with craft beer, before Ryan was whisked away by another friend. Jeff grabbed a drink and scanned the room, wondering how long he had to stay before it was socially acceptable to leave. That's when he saw her. Sophie. She was leaning against the bar, laughing at something the bartender said, her messy bun replaced by loose waves that framed her face. She wore a green sweater that made her eyes look like spring after rain. Jeff froze, his brain short-circuiting. Of all the bars in the city, of all the nights, she was here. Before he could decide whether to approach her or fake a sudden emergency, Sophie turned, and her eyes landed on him. Recognition lit her face like sunrise. Well, she said, walking over with a smile that made Jeff forget how to breathe. If it isn't Mr. Spreadsheet. Jeff blinked. Mr. Spreadsheet? You told me you work in an office and love structure, she said, teasing. It fits. Jeff chuckled, shaking his head. I feel like I should be offended. But, fair. Sophie grinned. What are you doing here? Ryan's birthday, Jeff said, gesturing toward the paper crown in the distance. College friend. Same, Sophie said. Ryan and I go way back. Small world. Huh. Apparently, Jeff said, trying to sound casual while his heart did cartwheels. They found a quieter corner. Quieter being relative in a place where the bass could probably restart a stopped heart, and started talking. Sophie ordered a drink. Jeff nursed his beer, and the conversation flowed like they'd known each other for years. So, Sophie said, leaning in slightly, how's the rebellion going? Jeff laughed. You remembered. Of course, she said. You were very passionate about your anti-help desk manifesto. It's not a manifesto, Jeff said, grinning. Just boundaries. Boundaries are good, Sophie said. But you still seem tense. Jeff raised an eyebrow. You psychoanalyzing me now? Maybe, she said, eyes twinkling. You look like a guy who color codes his socks. Jeff smirked. Only the important ones. Sophie laughed, and Jeff felt that spark again. Brighter this time, like someone had turned up the dimmer switch on his life. They talked about everything travel. Sophie had been to 12 countries. Jeff had been to Cleveland. Hobbies? Sophie loved photography. Jeff collected vintage vinyl. And the weirdest things they'd ever eaten, Jeff's contribution. A questionable sushi roll at a work lunch. Sophie's? Fried tarantula in Cambodia. You ate a spider? Jeff said, horrified. 2, Sophie said, grinning. They were crunchy. Jeff shook his head. You're fearless. Or stupid, Sophie said. Depends on who you ask. Jeff smiled. I think fearless. For a moment, The noise of the bar faded, and it was just them. Two people who'd collided by accident and somehow found a rhythm. Later, as the party wound down, Sophie grabbed her coat. I should head out, she said. Early flight tomorrow. Another trip? Jeff asked. Always, Sophie said. It's kind of my thing. Jeff hesitated, then said, Can I see you again? When you're back. Sophie tilted her head, considering. Maybe, she said, a playful smile tugging at her lips. But only if you promise to do something spontaneous before then. Jeff blinked. Spontaneous. Yeah, Sophie said. Something that scares you a little. Something that's not in a spreadsheet. Jeff laughed nervously. Define scares. Surprise yourself, Sophie said, stepping closer. Then tell me about it. And with that, she was gone. Out the door, into the night, leaving Jeff standing there with his heart pounding and his brain screaming. What the hell counts as spontaneous? On the walk home, Jeff replayed her words. Something that scares you a little. His life was a fortress of routine: wake up, work, dinner, Netflix, sleep. Spontaneity wasn't just foreign. It was hostile territory. But he wanted to see her again. Badly. So maybe it was time to do something reckless. Something bold. Something that didn't involve a color-coded calendar. Jeff pulled out his phone and typed, fun things to do near me. The results were terrifying. Rock climbing. Improv classes. Salsa dancing. Salsa dancing. Jeff stared at the words like they were written in fire. He had 2 left feet. He had negative rhythm. He once sprained an ankle trying to do the cha-cha slide at a wedding. Perfect. If Sophie wanted spontaneous, Jeff would give her spontaneous, even if it killed him. Chapter 3. The Salsa Disaster. Jeff stood outside the dance studio like a man about to enter a gladiator arena. The sign above the door read Salsa tonight. Beginners welcome. In cheerful red letters which felt like a lie. Beginners weren't welcome, they were prey. He adjusted his collar, wiped his palms on his jeans, and reminded himself why he was here. Sophie. Sophie. With her fearless grin and her challenge to do something spontaneous. Well, this was spontaneous. This was terrifying. This was probably a mistake. Inside, the studio smelled faintly of sweat and ambition. A mirrored wall reflected a dozen people stretching and chatting, all of them looking like they'd been born with rhythm in their DNA. Jeff swallowed hard. He had the rhythm of a malfunctioning printer. First time, a voice startled him. Jeff turned to see a man in his 50s wearing a Hawaiian shirt and a smile that could power a small city. Is it that obvious? Jeff said. Only because you're standing like you're waiting for a firing squad, the man said, chuckling. Relax. Salsa's fun. Name's Tony. Jeff, he said, shaking Tony's hand. And yeah, I'm new. Don't worry, Tony said. You'll be spinning like a pro in no time. Jeff doubted that very much, but he nodded anyway. The instructor, a woman named Marisol with heels that looked like weapons, clapped her hands. Okay, beginners. Let's start with the basic step. Jeff tried to follow. Left foot forward, right foot back, sidestep, repeat. Easy, right? Except his feet had other plans. They tangled like earbuds in a pocket. He stepped on his own shoe, twice. At one point, he accidentally kicked Tony, who just laughed and said, adds character. By the third song, Jeff was sweating like he'd run a marathon. His shirt clung to his back, his legs felt like cooked spaghetti, and his dignity was circling the drain. Then he heard a voice behind him, a voice that made his stomach flip. Well, look at you, Mr. Spreadsheet. Jeff froze. Slowly, he turned. Sophie stood in the doorway, wearing black jeans and a red top that looked like it had been designed for dancing. Her hair was down. Her smile was pure mischief. You've got to be kidding me, Jeff said, half laughing, half horrified. You're here. Friend dragged me, Sophie said, strolling in like she owned the place. But this is gold. Jeff groaned. Please tell me you didn't see that last move. Oh, I saw, Sophie said, grinning. You almost took out Tony. Tony's fine, Jeff muttered. He's indestructible. Tony waved from across the room. Looking good, Jeff. Jeff wanted to sink into the floor. Sophie joined the class, and suddenly Jeff's humiliation had an audience. Worse, Marisol paired them up. Partners, she announced. You two, perfect. Jeff stared at Sophie. This is cruel. This is fate, Sophie said, eyes sparkling. Come on, Mr. Spreadsheet. Show me what you've got. Jeff placed his hand on her waist, trying not to notice how warm she felt, how close she was. His other hand held hers, and for a second, the noise of the studio faded. Then Marisol shouted, basic step. 1, 2, 3. Jeff moved. Sophie moved. Somehow they didn't collide. In fact, it wasn't terrible. Sophie laughed as Jeff concentrated like he was defusing a bomb. You're doing great, she teased. I'm doing something, Jeff said, grinning despite himself. They spun, they stepped, they stumbled. At one point, Jeff accidentally twirled Sophie into a mirror, but she just laughed harder. And somewhere between the awkward turns and the offbeat steps, Jeff felt something shift. He was having fun. Real fun. Not spreadsheet fun. Not Fix Karen's formula fun. Actual messy, ridiculous fun. After class, they walked out together into the cool night air. Jeff's shirt was damp, his hair was a disaster, but he didn't care. So, Sophie said, hands in her pockets. That was impressive. Impressive, Jeff said. I looked like a malfunctioning Roomba. You tried, Sophie said. That's what matters. Jeff smiled. So, do I pass the spontaneity test? Sophie tilted her head, pretending to think. Salsa class on a random Tuesday? That's pretty good. Pretty good, Jeff said. I risked permanent injury. Sophie laughed. Fine, you pass. They stood there for a moment, the city humming around them. Jeff wanted to ask her out, really ask her out, but the words stuck. Sophie seemed like someone who belonged to the world, not to a calendar. What if she said no? What if she laughed? Before he could decide, Sophie said, I'm starving. You hungry? Jeff blinked. Yeah. Great, Sophie said, smiling. There's a taco truck around the corner. Come on. And just like that, Jeff followed her into the night, feeling more alive than he had in years. They ate tacos under a string of lights, sitting on a curb like teenagers. Sophie told stories about her travels, getting lost in Venice, camping under the stars in Morocco, eating noodles at 3 a.m. in Tokyo. Jeff listened, fascinated. Her life sounded like a movie. It sounded like, well, a spreadsheet. You ever think about traveling? Sophie asked, biting into a taco. Sure, Jeff said. I think about it every time I see a screensaver. Sophie laughed. You should go. Pick a place. Just go. Jeff shook his head. I wouldn't even know where to start. Start anywhere, Sophie said. Life's too short for safe bets. Jeff looked at her, really looked at her. The way her eyes lit up when she talked about sunsets in Santorini, the way she laughed like she wasn't afraid of anything. And he thought maybe she was right. Maybe life was too short for safe bets. When they finally said goodbye, Sophie hugged him. Quick, warm, effortless. See you around, Mr. Spreadsheet, she said, and disappeared into the night. Jeff stood there, heart thudding, tacos forgotten. He'd survived salsa. He'd laughed. He'd felt something big. And for the first time in a long time, Jeff Brinks didn't want to go home and watch Netflix. He wanted more nights like this, more laughter, more Sophie. Chapter 4. The challenge deepens. Jeff woke up the next morning with sore legs and a bruised ego. Salsa had been an experience. He'd survived, sure, but his dignity was limping. Still, he couldn't stop smiling. Sophie had laughed with him, not at him. She'd eaten tacos with him on a curb like it was the most natural thing in the world. And she'd hugged him. Quick, warm, but enough to leave a phantom imprint on his chest. He wanted more of that. More Sophie. More nights that didn't feel like reruns of his own life. But then he remembered her words. Do something that scares you a little. Surprise yourself. Salsa had been step 1. What was step 2? Jeff stared at his ceiling like it might have answers. Didn't. It just had a crack shaped vaguely like Florida. By noon, Jeff was scrolling through his phone, searching for ideas. Rock climbing? No. He had the upper body strength of a breadstick. Improv comedy? Absolutely not. He'd rather wrestle a bear. Skydiving? He closed the tab before his anxiety could file a restraining order. He needed something bold but not fatal. Something that said, look, Sophie, I'm not just Mr. Spreadsheet. I can be Mr. Adventure too. He thought about her stories, Venice, Morocco, Tokyo. She lived in color. He lived in grayscale. Maybe it was time to add some color. Then he saw it. Weekend kayaking trip, beginner friendly. The photo showed smiling people paddling on a calm river under a blue sky. It looked peaceful, manageable. Nobody was dangling from ropes or jumping out of planes. Perfect. Jeff booked it before he could chicken out. Saturday morning, Jeff stood by the river in a life vest that felt like a medieval torture device. The guide, a guy named Trevor with a beard that could house wildlife, was explaining paddle techniques. Jeff nodded like he understood, though his brain was screaming, you're about to drown in front of strangers. Relax, Trevor said, clapping Jeff on the shoulder. The river's gentle today. Gentle. Jeff clung to that word like a lifeline. He climbed into the kayak, wobbled like a newborn deer, and finally settled. The water was cold, the paddle heavy, but the view was stunning. Trees arching overhead, sunlight dancing on ripples. For a moment, Jeff felt calm. Then his phone buzzed in the waterproof pouch strapped to his vest. He fished it out, praying it wasn't work. It wasn't. It was Sophie. Sophie, morning, Mr. Spreadsheet. What's today's adventure? Please tell me it's not reorganizing your sock drawer. Jeff grinned, typing back with wet fingers. Jeff, kayaking. On a river, wearing a vest that smells like fear. 3 dots appeared. Then, Sophie, kayaking? Look at you. Proud of you. Try not to flip over. Jeff chuckled, tucking the phone away. Her words warmed him more than the sun. The trip was mostly smooth. Jeff paddled like his life depended on it, which technically it did. He only spun in circles twice and only crashed into a tree once. Progress. By the time they reached the endpoint, his arms felt like noodles, but his chest buzzed with something new, pride. He'd done it. He'd faced the river and lived. That night, Jeff texted Sophie a photo of the kayak with the caption, "Survived. Barely. Do I get bonus points?" Her reply came fast. "Major bonus points. You're officially leveling up." Jeff smiled so hard his cheeks hurt. A week later, they met for coffee. No spilled drinks this time, though Sophie joked about bringing a tarp, just in case. She looked radiant in a denim jacket and boots, her hair catching the light like it had secrets. "So," she said, stirring her latte, "kayaking. That's impressive." "Impressive is a stretch," Jeff said. "I spent half the time praying to the river gods." Sophie laughed. "Still counts. You're getting good at this whole spontaneity thing." Jeff shrugged, grinning. "Trying." They talked for hours about books, movies, the weirdest things people say on airplanes. Sophie teased him about his obsession with structure. Jeff teased her about her inability to stay in one place for more than a week. "You ever think about slowing down?" Jeff asked. Sophie tilted her head. "Sometimes. But then I see a cheap flight and poof." Jeff smiled. "You're like a human passport. And you're like a human calendar," Sophie said, grinning. "Opposites attract, right?" Jeff's heart thumped. Was that flirting? He hoped so. As they walked out, Sophie said, "Next time, you pick the adventure." Jeff froze. "Next time." "Yeah," Sophie said, smiling. "Surprise me." Jeff nodded, trying not to panic. Surprise her? He'd barely survived salsa and kayaking. What was next? Fire juggling. Shark wrestling? But as Sophie hugged him goodbye, Jeff thought, whatever it is, it'll be worth it. That night, Jeff sat at his desk, staring at his laptop. Work emails blinked like needy toddlers, but he ignored them. Instead, he opened a new tab and typed, "Fun date ideas that don't involve death." The results were promising. Cooking class, art workshop, outdoor movie night. Jeff smiled. He could do this. He could be spontaneous. He could be more than Mr. Spreadsheet. For Sophie, he wanted to be Mr. Adventure, even if it killed him. Chapter 5. Cooking up chaos. Jeff had never been so nervous about vegetables in his life. He stood outside La Petite Cuisine, a trendy cooking studio with big windows and soft jazz floating out like confidence in sound form. Inside, people in crisp aprons were laughing, chopping, sautéing like they were auditioning for a Food Network show. Jeff adjusted his collar and reminded himself, this was his idea. His spontaneous idea. Sophie had said, "Next time you pick the adventure." So here he was, about to dice onions in front of a woman who had eaten tarantulas in Cambodia. He was doomed. The door swung open, and Sophie walked in like the room had been waiting for her. She wore a simple black top and jeans, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, and somehow looked like she belonged in a Michelin star kitchen. Jeff felt his pulse trip over itself. "Mr. Spreadsheet," she said, grinning. "Look at you. Apron and everything." Jeff glanced down at the apron he'd tied too tight, cutting off circulation to his midsection. "I'm embracing the role," he said. "Chef Brinks at your service." Sophie laughed, and Jeff's nerves loosened a fraction. "So what are we making?" Jeff gestured toward the chalkboard menu. "Handmade pasta and classic marinara." "Pasta," Sophie said, eyes lighting up. "Ambitious." "Ambitious is my middle name," Jeff said, then added, "Actually, it's Alan, but close enough." Sophie laughed again, and Jeff felt like he'd won a small lottery. The instructor, a cheerful woman named Camille with a French accent that made everything sound like poetry, clapped her hands. "Bienvenue. Tonight we make pasta from scratch. Flour, eggs, love, voila." Jeff nodded like he understood, though his brain was screaming, flour, eggs, panic, voila. They gathered around a long counter, bowls and rolling pins laid out like weapons. Camille demonstrated the technique. Make a flour well, crack eggs into the center, whisk gently, then knead until smooth. "Easy," Sophie whispered, smirking. "Sure," Jeff muttered. "If you're a wizard." Jeff cracked his first egg. It missed the flour well entirely and skidded across the counter like a hockey puck. Sophie snorted, covering her mouth. "Strong start," she teased. "Just warming up," Jeff said, grabbing a towel. The egg wanted freedom. His second attempt was better, mostly. The yolk stayed put, but when he tried whisking, the flour exploded like a snowstorm, dusting his shirt, his face, and Sophie's sleeve. "Oh my God," Sophie said, laughing so hard she had to lean on the counter. "You look like a ghost." Jeff wiped his face, grinning despite himself. "It's called rustic charm." "Sure," Sophie said, still laughing. "Very rustic." As they kneaded the dough, Jeff's hands stuck like glue. Sophie's dough was smooth, elegant, Instagram ready. Jeff's looked like something a toddler abandoned in a sandbox. "Need help?" Sophie asked, eyes dancing. "I'm fine," Jeff said, tugging at the sticky mess. "Totally fine." "You're wrestling it," Sophie said, stepping closer. "Here, like this." She placed her hands over his, guiding the motion. Her fingers were warm, her touch light, and suddenly Jeff forgot how to breathe. "See?" she said softly. "Gentle." Persuasive. Jeff swallowed. I'll keep that in mind. For a moment, the world shrank to the feel of her hands, the sound of her laugh, the way her hair brushed her cheek. Then Camille clapped her hands, and the spell broke. They rolled out the pasta, cut it into ribbons, and dropped it into boiling water. Jeff managed not to burn himself, which felt like victory. When the marinara was done, they plated their creations. Sophie's looked like art. Jeff's looked like a cry for help. Presentation isn't everything, Jeff said, eyeing his lopsided noodles. True, Sophie said, twirling a perfect strand. Taste matters. They took a bite. Jeff braced for disaster. But it was good. Really good. He blinked. Holy crap, he said. I made food. Edible food, Sophie said, smiling. I'm impressed. Jeff grinned. Ambitious Alan delivers. After class, they walked out into the cool night, the city humming around them. Sophie carried a small box of leftover pasta. Jeff carried the memory of her laugh like a secret treasure. That was fun, Sophie said, pulling her jacket tighter. Messy but fun. Messy is my specialty, Jeff said. You should see my sock drawer. Sophie laughed and Jeff felt bold. Bolder than he had in years. Next time, he said. You pick the adventure. Sophie tilted her head, smiling. Next time, Jeff nodded. If you're up for it. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes warm, curious. I'm up for it. And just like that, Jeff felt the world tilt. Not in a scary way, but in a way that made everything seem possible. That night, lying in bed, Jeff replayed the evening. The flower explosion. Sophie's hands guiding his. Her laugh, her smile, the way she'd said, I'm up for it. He felt something he hadn't felt in years. A sense of forward motion. Like his life was finally leaving the station. He didn't know where this train was headed. But for once, Jeff Brinks wasn't afraid of the ride. Chapter 6. The Growing Connection. Jeff had never looked forward to a Tuesday so much in his life. It wasn't because of work. His inbox was still a battlefield of passive-aggressive subject lines. It wasn't because of the weather. January in Oregon was gray enough to make a poet cry. No, it was because Sophie had texted him the night before. Sophie, coffee tomorrow? My treat. Unless you're busy alphabetizing your spice rack. Jeff had stared at the message for a full minute, grinning like an idiot. Then he typed back, Jeff, spice rack is already alphabetized. Free as a bird. Now here he was walking into the same cozy coffee shop where they'd first met. Minus the latte disaster, hopefully. Sophie was already there, sitting by the window, sunlight catching in her hair like it had been hired by a romance novel cover artist. She waved, and Jeff felt his pulse do that stupid cartwheel thing again. Mr. Spreadsheet, she said as he slid into the chair across from her. You're punctual. Shocking. I live for punctuality, Jeff said, smiling. It's my kink. Sophie laughed, nearly spilling her drink. Wow, that's specific. Jeff grinned. I aim to surprise. They talked for an hour, maybe two. Time blurred in that easy way it does when conversation feels like oxygen. Sophie told him about her latest trip to Seattle, where she'd gotten lost in Pike Place Market and ended up befriending a fishmonger. Jeff told her about his kayaking adventure, embellishing only slightly. He left out the part where he screamed internally for 3 miles. You're getting good at this, Sophie said, sipping her latte. Adventure suits you. Jeff shrugged, smiling. Still feels weird, but good weird. Good weird is the best kind, Sophie said. Keeps life interesting. Jeff nodded, thinking how much more interesting his life had become since Sophie crashed into it. Literally, with coffee. After coffee, they wandered through the city, hands in pockets, shoulders brushing occasionally like shy teenagers. They passed street musicians, food carts, and a bookstore that smelled like nostalgia. Sophie darted inside, pulling Jeff with her. Pick a book, she said, eyes sparkling. Something you'd never normally read. Jeff scanned the shelves, overwhelmed by choices. He was a nonfiction guy, business books, biographies, the occasional history tome. But Sophie was watching, and he wanted to surprise her. He grabbed a slim paperback with a pastel cover, Love in the Time of Algorithms. Sophie raised an eyebrow. Romantic comedy about dating apps? Bold choice. Jeff grinned. Ambitious Alan strikes again. She laughed, and Jeff felt that now familiar warmth spread through his chest. They ended up in the park, sitting on a bench with steaming cups of chai from a food cart. Sophie talked about her dream of writing a travel memoir. Jeff admitted he'd always wanted to learn guitar but never had the guts. Why not? Sophie asked. Jeff shrugged. Work, life, excuses. Excuses are boring, Sophie said. You should do it. Jeff smiled. Maybe I will. For a moment, the world felt soft. Gray skies, bare trees, the hum of traffic in the distance. Jeff wanted to freeze it, bottle it, keep it forever. But then his phone buzzed. A work email. Urgent. Jeff's jaw tightened. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. His pocket felt like a hive of angry bees. You okay? Sophie asked, noticing his expression. Yeah, Jeff said quickly. Just work stuff. On a Saturday? Sophie frowned. That's rough. Jeff forced a smile. It's fine. But it wasn't fine. The emails kept coming, and Jeff's brain started spiraling. Deadlines, reports, the new hire who couldn't figure out basic procedures. He'd promised himself he wouldn't be the fixer anymore, but ignoring problems felt like leaving a door unlocked in a storm. Sophie watched him for a moment, then said softly, "You know, you don't have to answer them right now." "I know," Jeff said. "It's just hard." "Hard to let go?" Sophie asked. Jeff nodded, staring at his chai. "Yeah." Sophie didn't push. She just sipped her drink, her silence gentle but heavy. Jeff hated that he'd let work intrude on her. He hated that part of him still felt chained to that office, even when he was sitting in a park with someone who made the world feel bigger. They walked back in comfortable quiet, but Jeff sensed a shift, a tiny crack in the easy rhythm they'd built. Sophie hugged him goodbye, warm but quick, and said, "See you soon?" like a question instead of a promise. Jeff nodded, smiling, but as he watched her walk away, his chest felt tight. He wanted to be the guy who could turn off his phone and live in the moment. He wanted to be the guy Sophie believed he could be. Maybe he still could. But first, he had to figure out how to stop being the guy who answered emails in his head while holding her hand. That night, Jeff sat on his couch, staring at his phone. He could dive into work, clear the inbox, feel that fleeting rush of control. Or he could do something else, something that scared him a little, like Sophie said. He opened his laptop and typed, "Beginner guitar lessons near me." The search results glowed like a dare. Jeff smiled slowly. Maybe it was time to learn a new rhythm, one that didn't involve spreadsheets. Chapter 7. The conflict. Jeff's phone buzzed at 6:45 a.m., dragging him out of a dream where he and Sophie were kayaking through Venice canals while eating tacos. Reality was less romantic. An email from his manager marked urgent in all caps. He groaned, rolled over, and opened it. The new hire, Brandon, the guy Jeff had trained last month, had botched a major report. The client was furious. The deadline was today. And guess who they wanted to fix it? Jeff stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. He'd promised himself he wouldn't be the fixer anymore. He'd promised himself he'd set boundaries. But the email wasn't a request. It was a command. And if he didn't do it, the fallout would be nuclear. He sat up, rubbed his face, and muttered, "So much for boundaries." By 8 a.m., Jeff was at his desk, drowning in spreadsheets. His coffee went cold, his breakfast sat untouched, and his inbox multiplied like rabbits. Every time he tried to breathe, another email popped up. "Jeff, can you check this?" "Jeff, quick question." "Jeff, help." He wanted to scream. Instead, he worked, fast, efficient, like a machine. By noon, he'd salvaged the report, soothed the client, and saved the day again. And nobody would know except his manager, who'd probably thank him with a thumbs-up emoji. Jeff leaned back, exhausted. His phone buzzed. "Sophie. Sophie, hey adventurer. Free tonight? There's a rooftop movie screening. Thought of you." Jeff stared at the message, guilt gnawing at his ribs. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to sit under the stars with Sophie and forget about pivot tables and deadlines. But he couldn't. He had 3 more fires to put out and a meeting at 6. Jeff, wish I could. Swamped with work. Rain check. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Sophie, sure. Another time. Jeff stared at the screen, feeling like he just dropped something fragile. He typed back, "Promise." But the word felt hollow. The next day, Jeff tried to make it up to her. He texted, "Dinner this weekend? My treat." Hours passed. No reply. He checked his phone every 10 minutes, like a teenager waiting for a crush to notice him. Finally, at 4 p.m., her message came. "Sophie. Busy this weekend. Maybe next week." Jeff frowned. The words were polite, but the tone felt distant. He replayed their last conversation in his head. Had he sounded dismissive? Had she felt like she wasn't a priority? He hated that thought. Sophie deserved better than being squeezed between work emergencies. By Friday, Jeff was running on fumes. He'd worked late every night, skipped lunch twice, and ignored 3 calls from his mom. When Sophie finally texted, "Coffee tomorrow?" he felt relief flood his chest. He typed back, "Yes, absolutely. Name the time." Saturday morning, Jeff arrived at the coffee shop early, determined to fix whatever crack had formed. Sophie walked in 5 minutes later, looking as effortlessly stunning as always. But her smile was smaller, her eyes guarded. "Hey," Jeff said, standing to pull out her chair. "Good to see you." "You too," Sophie said, sitting down. Her tone was light, but not warm. Jeff ordered his usual. Sophie ordered tea. Tea. She was a latte girl. Jeff's stomach sank. "So," Jeff said, trying for casual. "How was your week?" "Busy," Sophie said. "Lots of writing. Lots of thinking." Jeff nodded, unsure what to say. Silence stretched like a rubber band. Finally, Sophie sighed. "Jeff, can I be honest?" "Please," Jeff said, bracing himself. "You're great," Sophie said. "Really great. But I feel like I'm competing with your job." Jeff blinked. "What? No, you're not. Every time we make plans, work wins," Sophie said gently. "And I get it, you're dedicated. That's admirable. But is there room for anything else?" Jeff's throat tightened. I'm trying, he said. I swear I'm trying. I know, Sophie said. But trying isn't the same as doing. Her words hit like a punch. Not cruel, just true. Jeff wanted to argue, to explain how hard it was to break habits built over years. But all he could do was stare at his coffee, feeling like the guy who'd saved 100 spreadsheets and lost the one thing that mattered. I'm not saying this to hurt you, Sophie said softly. I just need to know if this is something you want. Really want. Jeff looked up, meeting her eyes. I do, he said, voice low. I want this. I want you. Sophie's expression softened, but her shoulders stayed tense. Then show me. Jeff nodded, heart pounding. I will. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the coffee shop filling the space between them. Then Sophie stood, slipping on her jacket. I should go, she said. Deadline. Jeff stood too. Can I call you later? Sure, Sophie said, smiling faintly. Later. And then she was gone, leaving Jeff with a cold coffee and a knot in his chest. That night, Jeff lay in bed, staring at the ceiling crack shaped like Florida. He thought about Sophie's words, show me. He thought about his life, his routines, his endless emails. And he realized something brutal. If he didn't change, he'd lose her. Not because she didn't care, but because she cared enough to want more than scraps of his time. Jeff grabbed his phone and opened his calendar. He stared at the wall of meetings, deadlines, obligations. Then, slowly, he started deleting, clearing space, making room. For Sophie, for himself, for a life that wasn't just spreadsheets. Chapter 8. The turning point. Jeff stared at his calendar like it was a battlefield. Meetings stacked like dominoes, deadlines blinking like warning lights. For years, this grid had been his comfort zone, his fortress of control. Now it felt like a prison. Sophie's words echoed in his head. Show me. Not tell. Not promise. Show. Jeff clicked delete on 3 non-essential meetings. His finger hovered over a fourth, an optional sync that was neither optional nor useful. He deleted that too. The empty spaces looked strange, like gaps in a wall. But they also looked good, like windows. Then he opened a blank email and started typing. Subject, career path discussion. Hi Mark. I'd like to schedule time to talk about my role and future at the company. I've been here 3 years, and I want clarity on where I stand and what steps I need to take to move forward. Thanks, Jeff. He read it twice, heart pounding. It wasn't angry. It wasn't passive. It was direct, honest, something he should have done months ago. He hit send before fear could drag him back. The meeting was set for 3 p.m. Jeff spent the next few hours rehearsing in his head, pacing like a man preparing for a duel. He wasn't going to rant. He wasn't going to beg. He was going to state facts, his contributions, his loyalty, his desire for growth. And if they didn't have a plan for him, then maybe it was time to make his own. At 2:59, Jeff walked into Mark's office. His manager looked up from his laptop, smiling like nothing was on fire. Jeff, what's up? Jeff sat down, spine straight. I wanted to talk about my role and my future here. Mark blinked, surprised. Okay, sure. What's on your mind? Jeff took a breath. I've been here 3 years. I've trained new hires, solved problems, kept things running smoothly. But in the last year, 3 people I trained were promoted over me. I need to understand why. Mark's smile faltered. Jeff, you're invaluable. You're the guy everyone relies on. That's the problem, Jeff said, voice steady. I'm reliable, so I stay put. I want more than that. I want growth, responsibility, a clear path forward. Mark leaned back, rubbing his chin. Honestly, we've kept you in your role because you're, well, the glue. If you move, things fall apart. Jeff nodded slowly. I get that. But if being the glue means I never move, then I need to rethink things. Silence stretched. Then Mark sighed. You're right. We've taken advantage of your reliability. That's on us. Let me talk to HR. We'll outline a development plan, something concrete. In the meantime, I'm going to put in for a raise to compensate you for all the extra work you've done. Jeff felt a weight lift just a little. That's all I'm asking. Mark smiled again, this time with something like respect. Good for you, Jeff. Seriously. Jeff walked out feeling taller, not because he had a promotion, but because he'd finally stopped being silent. He'd drawn a line, and it felt damn good. Meanwhile, across town, Sophie sat in a cafe with her laptop open and her thoughts scattered. She was supposed to be writing an article about hidden gems in Portland, but her mind kept drifting to Jeff, his smile, his awkward salsa moves, the way he'd looked at her like she was sunlight. She liked him, more than liked him, but she wasn't sure if liking him was enough. Sophie had built a life on freedom, planes, trains, last-minute trips. Jeff lived in grids and schedules. Could those worlds meet without colliding? She thought about their last conversation, his promise to show her. She wanted to believe him. She wanted him to fight for this, for her. But she also knew how easy it was for people to get stuck in their patterns. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jeff. Jeff, meeting went well. Got a plan for growth. Also cleared my calendar for next Friday. You free? Sophie stared at the screen, her heart doing a little flip. He'd cleared his calendar. For her. For them. She typed back, free. What's the plan? 3 dots appeared. Then Jeff, surprise. And no spreadsheets involved. Sophie smiled, warmth blooming in her chest. Maybe opposites didn't just attract. Maybe they balanced. That night, Jeff sat on his couch, guitar resting on his lap. He'd signed up for lessons, bought the cheapest acoustic he could find, and now stared at it like it was a puzzle. His fingers fumbled over the strings, producing sounds that could legally qualify as noise pollution. But he kept trying, because Sophie had said, surprise yourself. And for the first time in years, Jeff was doing exactly that. Chapter 9. The Big Gesture. Jeff had never been so nervous about a picnic basket in his life. It sat on the passenger seat like a ticking bomb, stuffed with sandwiches, fruit, and a bottle of sparkling cider he'd Googled at 2 a.m. He'd even thrown in a blanket, because apparently spontaneous adventures required blankets. The GPS on his phone glowed with directions to Silver Falls State Park, a place Jeff had never been but Sophie had mentioned once in passing. Her eyes lighting up like it was heaven on earth. This was it. His big gesture. No spreadsheets, no calendars, no safety nets. Just Jeff, a picnic basket, and a plan that involved waterfalls and maybe, just maybe, a kiss. He checked his phone for the 10th time. Sophie's last text was still there. Sophie, free Friday. Surprise me. Jeff gripped the steering wheel, heart thudding. Surprise her? He was about to surprise himself. He'd never done anything like this, driving 2 hours on a whim, planning a day that wasn't color-coded. But he wanted to show her he meant it, that he could be more than Mr. Spreadsheet, that he could be the guy who said yes to life. When Sophie opened her door, Jeff almost forgot how to speak. She wore jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair loose, her smile curious. Wow, she said, eyeing the basket. You brought props. Jeff grinned nervously. Props for adventure. Sophie laughed, sliding into the car. Okay, Mr. Adventure. Where are we going? Jeff started the engine, trying to sound casual. Silver Falls. Sophie's eyes widened. Seriously? That's like legit outdoorsy. Jeff nodded. Figured it was time to level up. Sophie smiled, warmth blooming in her expression. I'm impressed. Jeff exhaled, relief washing over him. Step 1, success. The drive was easy, conversation flowing like music. Sophie told him about her latest article, Quirky Roadside Attractions, and Jeff confessed he'd started guitar lessons. Sophie nearly choked on her coffee. Guitar? She said, laughing. Look at you. Jeff grinned. Don't look too closely. I sound like a cat falling downstairs. Sophie laughed harder, and Jeff felt his nerves melt. This was good. This was right. Silver Falls was breathtaking. Towering trees, crisp air, waterfalls crashing like applause. Jeff parked, grabbed the basket, and tried not to look like a man who'd spent 20 minutes Googling how to pack a romantic picnic. They hiked to a clearing near a waterfall, mist curling like smoke. Jeff spread the blanket, laid out the food, and prayed nothing looked too desperate. Sophie sat down, eyes shining. Jeff, this is amazing. Jeff smiled, heart pounding. Glad you like it. They ate, laughed, and talked about everything. Travel dreams, childhood stories, the weirdest things they'd ever Googled. Sophie teased him about his obsession with punctuality. Jeff teased her about her inability to stay in one place. You're like a comet, Jeff said. Bright, fast, impossible to catch. Sophie tilted her head, smiling softly. And you're like gravity. Jeff blinked. Gravity. Steady, Sophie said. Grounded. Keeps things from flying apart. Jeff swallowed, her words sinking deep. Is that good? It's good, Sophie said. Most of the time. Her tone was light, but Jeff heard the weight beneath it. He set down his sandwich, heart thudding. Sophie, he said quietly. I know I've been stuck in my routines, in work, but I'm trying. Not just for you, for me. I don't want to live like that anymore. Sophie looked at him, her eyes soft but searching. I believe you. I just need to know it's real. Jeff nodded, throat tight. It's real. I cleared my calendar. I talked to my manager. I'm learning guitar, for God's sake. Sophie laughed, the tension breaking like a wave. Guitar is a strong argument. Jeff grinned. Wait until you hear me play. You'll run. I'll risk it, Sophie said, smiling. They packed up as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and pink. Jeff walked beside Sophie, their hands brushing, then tangling like it was inevitable. Her fingers were warm, sure, and Jeff felt something settle in his chest, a quiet certainty. At the car, Sophie turned to him, her expression soft, unreadable. Jeff, yeah. His voice was barely a whisper. She stepped closer, her eyes locking on his. You're full of surprises. Jeff smiled, heart racing, trying to keep up, and then she kissed him. Slow, sweet, like a promise. Jeff kissed her back, the waterfall roaring in the distance, the world narrowing to this moment, this woman, this life he wanted more than anything. On the drive home, Sophie dozed against his shoulder, and Jeff thought about everything. His job, his guitar, his calendar with its new empty spaces. For the first time in years, the future didn't look like a spreadsheet. It looked like a map, wide and open, with Sophie's laughter marking the way. Chapter 10. Resolution. Jeff woke up Monday morning feeling different. Not because the alarm still sounded like a dying robot, or because his coffee tasted like optimism in a mug. No, it was because for the first time in years, he didn't dread walking into the office. He had a plan. He had a voice. And he had Sophie, her kiss still lingering like sunlight on his skin. He straightened his tie, grabbed his laptop, and headed out, humming a tune that was supposed to be a guitar riff but sounded more like a confused bee. Progress. At work, the usual chaos greeted him. Emails, pings, Karen shouting about a broken formula. But Jeff didn't flinch. He opened his calendar, saw the empty spaces he'd carved out, and smiled. He wasn't going to fill them with pointless meetings. He was going to fill them with life. At 10 a.m., Mark called him into his office. Jeff walked in, calm but alert. "Jeff," Mark said, grinning. "Got good news. HR approved a development plan for you. Leadership training, mentorship, and..." He paused for dramatic effect. "A promotion track." Jeff blinked. "Seriously? Seriously," Mark said. "You've earned it. Honestly, we should have done this sooner." Jeff felt something warm bloom in his chest. Not just pride, but relief. He'd fought for this. He'd asked for what he deserved. And he'd gotten it. "Thanks, Mark," Jeff said, smiling. "Really?" Mark nodded. "One more thing, don't stop being the guy everyone trusts. That's rare." Jeff smiled. "I won't. But I'm also going to be the guy who knows his worth." Mark grinned. "Fair enough." By lunchtime, Jeff was floating. He texted Sophie. "Jeff, guess who's officially on a promotion track?" Her reply came fast. "Sophie. Mr. Spreadsheet leveling up? Proud of you." Jeff. "Mr. Adventure. Thank you very much." Sophie. "Adventure and ambition. Dangerous combo." Jeff grinned, typing back. "Dinner tonight? My treat. No spreadsheets allowed." Sophie. "Deal." That evening, Jeff picked Sophie up and drove to a little Italian place with twinkling lights and a patio that smelled like garlic and romance. Sophie looked stunning in a simple dress, her smile brighter than the candles on the tables. "Promotion track?" she said as they sat down. "Look at you." Jeff shrugged, grinning. "Turns out speaking up works." "Who knew?" Sophie teased. "So what's next?" "World domination." Jeff laughed. "Maybe just balance. Work, life, guitar lessons that don't sound like a crime scene." Sophie smiled softly. "I like that." They ordered pasta and wine, and as they ate, Jeff felt something settle. A sense of rightness, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't fearless. But he was trying. And for the first time, trying felt enough. After dinner, they walked under the city lights, Sophie's hand in his, their steps easy, unhurried. Jeff thought about the man he'd been, the fixer, the silent workhorse, the guy who lived in grids. And he thought about the man he was becoming. The guy who cleared his calendar for waterfalls, who learned guitar badly, who kissed Sophie under a sky painted in gold. He squeezed her hand, and she looked up, smiling. "What?" "Just glad you spilled coffee on me," Jeff said. Sophie laughed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Best accident ever." Jeff smiled, feeling the future stretch wide and bright ahead of them. Not a spreadsheet, but a map full of color, adventure, and love. 2 months later, Jeff sat on his couch, guitar in hand, strumming something that almost sounded like music. Sophie lounged beside him, scrolling through flight deals. "Barcelona," she said, eyes gleaming. "Cheap tickets." Jeff grinned. "You planning another escape?" "Not an escape," Sophie said, nudging him. "An adventure. With you." Jeff blinked. "Me? Barcelona? Why not?" Sophie said. "Life's too short for safe bets." Jeff looked at her, then at his guitar, then at the calendar on his phone. Empty spaces waiting to be filled. He smiled slowly. "Book it," he said. Sophie grinned, kissing him quick and sweet. "Mr. Adventure strikes again." Jeff laughed, strumming a chord that rang clear and bright. And for the first time in his life, he felt like he wasn't just keeping up. He was flying. Chapter 11. Barcelona bound, Jeff stood in the airport terminal, clutching his passport like it was a winning lottery ticket. He still couldn't believe he was doing this. Barcelona. With Sophie. 2 weeks ago, the idea of leaving the country felt like science fiction. Now he was staring at a departure board, his name on a ticket, his heart doing somersaults. Sophie appeared beside him, wheeling a suitcase that looked like it had seen more continents than Jeff had seen states. She wore sunglasses and a grin that could power a city. "Ready, Mr. Adventure?" she teased. Jeff grinned nervously. "Define ready." "Breathing," Sophie said. "Mostly upright. That counts." Jeff laughed, tension melting. "Then yeah, ready." The flight was long, but Sophie made it feel like a comedy show. Stories about her past trips, jokes about Jeff's obsession with aisle seats, a debate over whether airplane pretzels were edible or a government experiment. Jeff found himself laughing so hard the flight attendant gave them a look. When they landed, Barcelona hit Jeff like a sensory explosion. Sunlight bouncing off Gothic spires, the smell of fresh bread and sea air, voices spilling like music. Sophie grabbed his hand and said, "Come on." and Jeff followed, feeling like he'd stepped into a dream. They spent the day wandering through the city, La Rambla buzzing with life, the Sagrada Familia towering like a cathedral from another planet. Sophie snapped photos, Jeff marveled at everything, and somewhere between the tapas bar and the sunset over the Mediterranean, Jeff realized something. He wasn't thinking about work, not once. His phone was off, his mind was free, and his heart was full. That night, they sat on a rooftop terrace, sipping sangria under a sky scattered with stars. Sophie leaned back, her hair catching the candlelight, and said softly, "You're different." Jeff blinked. "Different how?" "Lighter," Sophie said. "Like you left more than Oregon behind." Jeff smiled, warmth blooming in his chest. "Maybe I did." And when he kissed her, slow and sure, it felt like the start of something bigger than Barcelona, something that could last. Chapter 12. Sparks and Shadows. The next few days were magic, sunlit mornings, lazy afternoons, nights humming with music and laughter. They ate paella by the beach, danced in a plaza under fairy lights, and got lost in the winding alleys of the Gothic Quarter. Jeff even tried speaking Spanish, which resulted in ordering 3 desserts instead of 1. Sophie laughed so hard she nearly cried. But magic has shadows. On the 5th day, Jeff's phone buzzed. He turned it on to check the weather, but the notifications hit like hail, emails, missed calls, urgent messages from work. His chest tightened. He stared at the screen, the old reflex kicking in. Fix it, handle it, save the day. Sophie noticed. "Work?" Jeff nodded, jaw tight. "Big issue. They need me." Sophie's smile faded. "You're on vacation." "I know," Jeff said. "But..." "No buts," Sophie said gently. "You fought for this time. Don't give it back." Jeff hesitated, torn between habit and hope. Finally, he powered off the phone and shoved it in his bag. "You're right." Sophie smiled, relief softening her eyes. "Good, because we have a sunset to catch." They walked to the beach, hand in hand, the sky bleeding orange and pink. Jeff felt the tension ebb, replaced by something stronger, a resolve. He wasn't going to lose this, not to work, not to fear. That night, over wine and laughter, Jeff told Sophie something he'd never said aloud. "I used to think success meant being indispensable. Now I think it means being free." Sophie reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. "That's the best definition I've ever heard." Jeff smiled, and for the first time he believed it. Chapter 13. The big finale. Their last day in Barcelona was a whirlwind, markets, music, a cable car ride that made Jeff question gravity. As they stood on Montjuic Hill, the city sprawling below like a painting, Sophie turned to him, her expression soft but serious. "So," she said, "what happens when we go home?" Jeff swallowed. "We keep going." "Going how?" Sophie asked. "Because I don't want this to be a vacation fling." Jeff stepped closer, heart pounding. "Neither do I. I want us. For real." Sophie searched his face, her eyes bright. "Even if I keep traveling." "Even if," Jeff said. "I'll learn to pack light." Sophie laughed, tears glinting in her eyes. "You'd do that." "I'd do anything," Jeff said. "As long as it's with you." And then he kissed her, deep, certain, the kind of kiss that writes its own ending. Epilogue. 6 months later, Jeff sat in a sunlit cafe in Lisbon, strumming his guitar while Sophie typed away on her laptop. His promotion had come through, his calendar was balanced, and his passport was full of stamps. He wasn't Mr. Spreadsheet anymore. He was Mr. Adventure, with Sophie by his side. She looked up, smiling. "Ready to explore?" Jeff grinned, setting the guitar aside. "Always." And together, they stepped into the bright, wide world. No spreadsheets, no limits, just love and laughter and the promise of more.